Ja, danke Peter. Darf ich jetzt noch einmal, bevor ich ins Englische switche, gibt es irgendjemanden, der eine Flüsterübersetzung benötigt? Weil dann müsste man das jetzt irgendwie arrangieren, räumlich auch. Schaut nicht so aus. Gut, wenn es Fragen gibt, auch Verständnisfragen in Bezug aufs Englische, kann man dann auch dazwischen fragen. Well, and then I really switched the language. My name is Monica, I'm a member of SOAL, among other things I'm doing, and I'm very happy to moderate this panel, which actually is not a whole lot of work, I think. But still, we have 3 speakers and looking very much forward to their presentations. We would like to organize this like that after each presentation, I will ask if there are questions of understanding. I mean, with regard to language problems, but maybe also because, I don't know, some facts are mentioned or some organizations that you don't know. But it's just for organization, for understanding, not for discussion. And after all 3 speakers have brought their presentation, we will have the general discussion in German, English, Russian, whatever there is, we'll manage that somehow. Yeah, and as Peter said, the speakers will present themselves, so I'll just give the floor to you.
Hi, thank you all for coming here today. My name is Maria. I'm an activist of Russians Against War movement. We are active globally. We do volunteering, we organize protests, cultural events, yeah.
Hello everyone, thank you very much for this warm welcome. Willkommen. My name is Vlad. I'm an activist of Russian anti-war movement, but also of Russian socialist movement. This is my organization, which is now, for obvious reason, partially is in Russia and partially is abroad. And besides activist job, I do studies in political science and sociology, and I hope to share some insights today.
Hello, my name is Lyola Nordik. I am from Feminist Anti-War Resistance. I'm one of many participants and one of many coordinators.
Great. Then I think we could say you will be the first. So maybe we just jump into the presentation, right?
Okay, great. So yes, the idea of our presentation is that we first discuss the general trend, something that we can observe in the general political, economic and social level. Then we will turn to the discussion of the protests and repressions, and then in the last third part we will focus on the feminist anti-war resistance in particular. So at first I will outline what happened in Russia in the last year and something that we already know from this year. So first of all, the outline. I will talk a little bit about theoretical framework because well, we can give you a lot of facts, but what also matters is how we interpret them, and this framework will clarify many things before we actually jump to facts. Then I will be talking about the consolidation of regime, which was very surprising last year for many observers. Then I will talk about the opposition and different kinds of it. Then the public opinion on war, which is very, very debatable. Then Russian immigrants, so a part of which we represent here, and then economical situation. So the idea is that we first discuss the condition in which most of Russian population now operate or do not operate, and the overall idea is that we hope actually to provide some answers to this popular and pretty annoying question why Russians do not protest. Maybe they actually do, but we will focus firstly on the conditions in which people are suggested to work. So first, the theoretical framework. There is this popular voluntaristic approach, right, which is basically the extension of market ideology to political realm. So this ideology says that if people want, they do and they succeed, right? And otherwise, if there is no observable action or no successful action, well, it basically means that people do not want it really. And unfortunately, this often applies to protesting activity and to political behavior, and this is what we are here today against. So we will basically say that we will start with this assumption that in order to change regime, there is not enough to have people who want to change the regime, which actually a lot of number of people in Russia want to, but also a deconsolidated elite, which is also important. You can think, I don't know, about Belarus 2 years ago when the opposition was very numerous and very strong, but the regime remained consolidated, and many other examples as well. So, but still in Russia, you may say that there is not a strong opposition, even that it is destroyed. And here we would say that, of course, for the strong opposition to emerge, there is a necessity to have certain kinds of conditions. For example, the low legitimacy of the state or the low repressive capacity, which we do not observe in Russia. Yes. Then we will be, of course, saying that if the level of condition in which people live and operate is decreasing, we would expect that, okay, there will be a mass rebellion on the other day. But actually the autocratization in Russia as well as in many countries were very gradual, very step by step, and very incremental, and that may partially explain what we will say later. Then there is no essential characteristic, right? We often say that Russians are morally retarded, or that they are, I don't know, they're passive, they're conformist, as if it is an essential characteristics of Russian. And this is also totally against like any sociology and any kind of political science, and of course it's totally against Marxism. And this is something that we will dispute today. And finally, yes, we will discuss why the worsening of everything of economic and political life may lead, of course, to voice, and we will talk about voice today, right? About the active opposition, but also it may lead to exit, emigration, for example, or adaptation when people stay silent. So these are three options and not only one, and they are all understandable, and we will try to outline what conditions lead to that. So let's begin with regime consolidation. So at the first days and weeks of invasion, there was this hope that Russian oligarchs will save us and everyone. That was very naive, right? As we see later. But the assumption was meaningful. So many people thought that, okay, if Russian oligarchs are losing money because of the war, because of the sanctions, they will rebel. But basically, there are much more diverse ways that Russian oligarchs in which Russian oligarchs can react, right? So oligarchs lose money, okay, that's understandable. But then we can see that very few, in fact, claim to stop the war at the beginning, although some did, right? But actually most stayed silent or explicitly anti-West. So it was a part of Putin's effort, very incremental effort that were lasting for decades, to consolidate elites and to threaten them in a sense. But also we can think about oligarchs. So for example, you lose half of your money, which you basically get from the oil and gas extraction and various corruption scheme. And why can you rebel? Do you think that you can basically earn such a huge wealth somewhere when you will be expelled from Russia? I don't think so, right? So even if this situation is worse than what they had before the war, this situation is still better compared to what they could have if they act against Putin. And here is actually the option which was unwillingly chosen by many of them. There is a huge list of Russian oligarchs who died in a very strange situation. So there is only a small part of this list. So you can see Leonid Shulman, director of transport of Gazprom, suicide note next to his body 1 month before the invasion. In the month of invasion, Igor Nosov, stroke. Okay, then exactly the day after the invasion, suicide of another Gazprom top manager. Then 4 days after the invasion, another kind of suicide. Then 1 month after the invasion, and again and again and again. And we see even in the last two lines that also the family members committed suicide, which is, well, if you live in Russia, you can read between lines, and maybe you have some kind of suspicion, and that's why the regime basically stayed consolidated. That's the first premise, the first thing that we have to take into account. But the consolidation was also more banal and more formal in a way. So this part is about liquidation of republics' autonomy. So Russian Federation is formally a federation. It consists of many regions, and these regions are diverse in terms of rights and in terms of autonomy they have from Moscow. And one of the most autonomous regions are republics, and there are around 20 republics. And the liquidation of republics' autonomy was also developing in this year, right? So the case that we have here is Tatarstan, a Tatar republic, which was the Euro-independent state for the first decade after the collapse of USSR, right? But then we see that at the end of the last year, the autonomy of Tatarstan was again and again incrementally decreased, and so this struggle between Moscow and regional center is always ongoing in Russia, but the last year was especially prominent for the much more serious steps. And in these lines you can see that actually the title of president now only Vladimir Putin can officially held, because otherwise it is prohibited. And that was the fate of Tatarstan president, which is now a governor, or I don't know. And last but not least, the important fact is that we are talking here partially about the process of colonization, or rather the results of the process of colonization. So Moscow stays strongly in control of the regions, and that is not least because of the resources that you can extract as a central authority. You can extract from these regions. So basically, Tatarstan belongs to the top 10 Russian wealthy regions due to oil and gas resources. Sorry. Yep. This is Russian map, and the colored parts are republics, and you can see that besides Tatarstan, the large green on the right is Republic of Yakutia or Sakha, which is also wealthy because of natural resources, but otherwise the regions are extremely poor. And here you can think, well, Russia does not really need these regions, but actually, the statistics says that Russia needs this region, and especially the necessity for these regions is growing in times of war. So basically, if you compare the numbers of people from ethnic background or ethnic republics that were killed during this invasion of Ukraine, we see an interesting pattern that actually the more non-Russian you are, the more likely you are to be killed in this war. And this next graph is demonstrating it better. Like so, you can see that the champions in terms of death in Ukraine are republics. Again, republics. Those that are supposedly having more autonomy. The Republic of Buryatia, where you have the highest mortality rate per 100,000 of men, then Tuva, then Altai Republic, then Zabalkaysky Krai, and then North Ossetia. So, and here is the question about resistance that we can see, and one of the resistances, of course, intellectual. So there are few things that we find important to say, because nowadays, when the Putin proclaimed that one of the goals of invasion is denazification, basically people from Russian regions were astonished. So you want to denazify Ukraine, but well, given the fact that you are very, very Nazis towards your own citizens from non-Russian regions, well, it doesn't sound credible. But here is what we have from the Marxist perspective. So in Marxism, imperialism is the highest stage of capitalism, right? But Soviet official Marxism was critical of this kind of capitalist imperialism, but was basically silent about the imperialism of Russia or of Soviet state. So basically, the processes that we were talking about the extraction of natural resources or the military conscription of people with the ethnic background, it's not just a story of Putin's Russia, right? But since USSR was not a capitalist state, right, the whole critique of colonization was not developed there with regards to the internal politics of USSR. But then in Putin's time, there is also this strong myth of voluntary joining or of reunion. And here on the picture, you can see that 18th of March is the day of reunion, meaning voluntary reunion in certain sense of Crimea and Russia. And if you think about any republic there, it will be also presented in this way. So this movement, this critique of Moscovite colonization is growing nowadays, but the problem is that it's not so easy to accept for regular Russians, because the part of Russian national identity is that, well, Russia is a great state, but it is not aggressive state, at least inward, inside, right? So there is still some problems that this movement will stuck into, but we hope that their success will come very soon. So what is the liberal and anti-colonial reaction to this movement? We have one of the prominent bloggers in Russian liberal opposition, Ksenia Sobchak, the daughter of former Putin's boss in St. Petersburg, Anatoly Sobchak, and these kind of bloggers, they give some public attention to the problems of ethnic minorities, especially in the context of war. But still, there is a certain kind of discreditation or certain kind of misinterpretation or misrepresentation. On the other hand, we have this actually the anti-colonial movement, the Free Buryatia Foundation, Buryats Against War. This is the initiative that helps, for example, among other things, to cross the border for people who are unwilling to die for Russian world, for Ruski Mir, right? And this is interesting because it's actually a very like a deep ideological debate, because Putin presents him as decolonizer, right? But it's obvious that Putin wants to say that his problem is the domination of United States. He doesn't feel this ideological message against colonization as such. He just wants to be another kind of successful colonizer. So, and as a brightest illustration, again, Buryats is the 0.3 of population, but their proportion of death of servicemen in Ukraine is 8 times larger than the proportion in the population. And of course, there is this narrative that in Russian wars the minority were recruited forcefully in every century. There is, of course, a strong anti-war resistance. That may sound surprising because we do not see every day in news that Russians resist, I mean, in the international news. But if you read closely some Russian sources, you will see, for example, this interesting number, that more than 50 military conscription officers were burned in Russia, with Molotov cocktail, of course. And at one day it was this feeling that, okay, it starts and it will develop, but then of course there was this reaction of Russian government which invented this law, or rather expanded the application of this law of terrorism and extremism to people who do this to military officers, and already sentenced many people for huge terms from 7 to 13, and now they want to extend it to 15 years, right? There is another kind of violent resistance, which is the so-called rail war. So this is what anarchists are doing in Russia. Of course, they are also chased by the police and also sentenced, but this is the kind of violent resistance that is not mainstream, and that's why it's interesting. And this resistance was kind of hesitantly supported by the mainstream opposition, by Navalny, but it was much more strongly supported from the left, from the youth democratic left, I would say, journal Doxa, and it was explicitly stated there many times that this is what is supposed to be done. Of course, they are not appealing. They are not saying that everyone must do this, because again the opportunities are very limited. But still. So, and here is what we say. Here is what we can say about Russian liberal opposition. So. It's always interesting to see how the people from current liberal opposition are connected, actually, or were connected to Putin's regime. Some of them participated directly in the establishment of Putin as a president, and the guy on the left was actually the head of Putin's presidential campaign, and afterwards now he was participating in this educational project, Revival, which is against war, which is against Putin, which is for democratic Russia, and the guy on the right was the Putin speechwriter, actually. And now they are all, some of the liberals which were pro-regime, they are now a part of opposition, which is interesting. And in this Revival project that I will talk more about in a minute, also Social Democrat Boris Kagarlitsky participates, which some of you may know. He teaches a course on social movements, basically. But there is, of course, the problem with the Russian opposition as such, especially with its liberal branch. So this is, for example, what they have as an introduction to their course. And and comrades from Russia will not let me lie, when you see these pictures, you feel like reading a textbook of history from school, right? So the same narrative about the greatness of Russia, about the fatherland, about our aspiration towards civilized Europe, and although not without the strong hand of the Peter the Greatest, for example, or Catherine II. But also some new kind of narratives which also fit in this larger one about the greatness of Soviet Union, or how well it went before the war in nowadays Russia. And here on the left you can see the picture from the from the World Cup, Football World Cup, which happened in Russia. And basically there is not much difference between what they offer ideologically in terms of discourse and the mainstream Kremlin discourse, right? And there is another interesting connection. So I'm not sure if someone knows this guy. So this is basically the head of Navalny team. The guy called Leonid Volkov. He became like the main leader, the organizer of Russian mainstream opposition after Alexei Navalny was imprisoned. And last week it was found out that Leonid Volkov signed a letter to von der Leyen and Borrell asking to lift, meaning to cancel sanctions about some Russian oligarchs. Okay, meaning Alpha Group leaders, Friedman, Ivan, Kuzmichov, and German Khan. These names are not very much present in nowadays politics, but some of these guys were successfully participating basically in the process of privatization, and that's how some of them became oligarchs, right? But the reasons for why the mainstream Russian opposition leaders signed the letter is that, well, these businessmen are not connected to government, which is interesting in Russian context, how you can be not connected, and what do you mean by not connected, and also invest a lot of money into the Ukrainian economy. Okay, I didn't Google it much, but I think it's at least controversial, right? And among people who also asked European Union to cancel the sanctions were other prominent figures in opposition. TV Rain, which is very famous one, founder and co-founders, former vice prime minister, which is probably also not connected to Russian government, I don't know, opposition politician, journalist, businessman Evgeny Chichvakin, which was one of the organizers of this Revival project that I showed on the previous slide. So that's the situation with the liberal opposition. Of course, we should not reduce everything what this opposition is doing to these things, but these connections are, of course, a reason of anxiety and suspicion in some of us. But of course, there is some left opposition, which is not as strong as the right liberal one. And here is what we can say about, for example, processes that now happen in Communist Party of Russian Federation. So 2 years ago, it was a hope that the Communist Party of Russian Federation will split. So there is this old part represented by Zyuganov and other people who are always pro-Kremlin, right? But there is a new generation in Communist Party which was very, very attractive. And one of the representatives of this new generation is Yevgeny Stupin, which is, after the imprisonment of Ilya Yashin, is probably the most popular opposition politician in Moscow. So he lives in Moscow still. He has, for example, 100,000 followers on Instagram. And last week, he was excluded from Communist Party of Russian Federation for this reason. So first of all, the day when the war started, he signed the letter Socialists and Communists Against War, being a deputy of Moscow State Duma. Then he was providing a positive characteristics in a criminal case to Ilya Yashin, which was imprisoned for his anti-opposition for 8 years, right? And also, the deputy Stupin was voting against the mayor of Moscow, Sobyanin's report in Moscow City Duma, right? But there is, of course, a more plausible reason for his exclusion, which is the upcoming elections in Moscow. So it would be very strange if a Communist Party of Russian Federation would nominate another politician, because given the media capital that this guy has, other things would be not very convincing, right? But and here is what happened. Unfortunately, you can't communicate with Yevgeny Stupin because he says that he is not giving interviews to foreign kind of press. I guess that's because of this foreign agent law, but. Anyway, that's what's going on. So what I wanted to say is that in opposition, there are many ways to oppose the invasion, right? And some people try the violent means. Some people go to emigration. Some people want to continue the legal work as Yevgeny Stupin did, right? But everywhere we find repressions, and repressions are more brutal in this if you oppose the regime in a violent way, of course, and they are not so brutal yet. For him, who was just expelled from Communist Party. What can we say about Russian society? This society which is allegedly conformist, right? So what public opinion polls say, if they are conducted in authoritarian regimes, of course, should be taken with a grain of salt, but nevertheless, we have some numbers which we must read carefully, right? So in August, month before the mobilization was declared, 44% of respondents were in favor of starting peace talks with Ukraine. And the month after mobilization, this number increased to almost 60% of respondents. So how does it happen? The sociologist approaches you, and you are not sure whether this guy or girl from government or not, and still 60% of respondents manage somehow to say that they're in favor of peace talks, which does not necessarily mean that they're against the war or Putin, or they will protest the next day, but still the number is there. And 50% in August and 40%, 36% was for continuation of hostilities in August and October. But still, the number of people who personally support, and the word personally is interesting here, is 73%. People who support the Russian military action on the territory of Ukraine. And there is some interpretation of this data, of course. So first of all, we can start from saying, well, that's because probably people are not educated enough, or people are poor and therefore they support, which might be true partially, right? But also we find that this myth of liberal intelligentsia or middle class that would definitely oppose such a decision has no strong relation with the support or opposition to war. Rather, what we see is that the generational factor is important, and the qualitative explanation for this fact is that young people were socialized in a different world, not so closed, more global. Russian youth traveled more and speak better foreign languages than their parents do. And that's what we can say so far. From a qualitative interviews that we conducted with public sociology laboratory, we see that people may often have some inconsistent views. We see that people perceive the war and the regime and politics in general as a natural disaster, you know. And if something happens, it just happens. You cannot really oppose. You can adapt, and that is what the regime is promoting. What regime was doing for decades. Next interesting part of the story is Russian immigrants. So we know already that last year around 1 million, but of course the estimations vary, left Russia for some reason. Here you can see the picture on the shoot on the Russian-Georgian border the next day after mobilization was declared. And what we can say about the people actually who migrated and who here, as we do, can speak in the name of Russian diaspora or the Russians in general. So these people are richer, younger, and more educated than those who remain. So we are talking here about relatively small and pretty privileged strata, right? Then we can show it in another dimension, that 45% of respondents are employed as IT, right? The second large group is employed in science and education, then art and culture. So basically these are people who do not do manual work. They are not like peasants or anything. We can also see even from this panel that female are more active than male, which is interesting as well, and that those who were repressed in Russia, and that is very important for understanding of how repression interact with political participation. Those who were repressed in Russia are more active in immigration than those who were not repressed, right? And the last point is about geography, right? We can say that Turkey, Georgia, Armenia, and Kazakhstan, so countries to where you can just migrate with your foreign passport, or to Armenia and Kazakhstan you can migrate without even having a foreign one. This is the most popular destination. Okay, the question is, if we assume that, as Marxists, right, that politics and economics are connected in some way, we would need to know what's going on in terms of people, economic situation. And here, what we can see. So, on the one hand, the narrative is very banal and familiar, right, to most of us, that the poverty and inequality, especially if we consider regional aspect, is huge in Russia, and we see that the Putin's regime, which is, I think, fairly called oftentimes neoliberal, but this is problematic, and I will explain in a minute why. For example, the State Duma rejected a draft law on a moratorium on the seizure of single housing for debts, which in simple words means that you will be expelled from your own house if you cannot pay the debt. The debt itself is huge, and we can say that roughly every Russian citizen is in debt for $1,000 if we split the whole the whole amount to Russian citizens. But there is some point which makes the whole story controversial. Poverty in the first year of invasion did not increase, rather it reduced. So people had more money than the previous year, and the bad side of the news is that this money are bloody, right? So in Russia you cannot really earn 1 million or 2 or 5 or 3 millions per month, but or you cannot even earn it in a year, because the median salary in Russia is around 300 euro per month. Here you can see that basically if you are a combatant, if you are mobilized, you will receive such a huge money that you could never earn doing your regular job in a region, especially in the ethnic region that is where we started from, right? And if you will be injured, you got 40,000 euro. If you are dead, your family will receive 60,000 euro. Of course, a lot of corruption is involved here, and not all people receive this money. But statistically speaking, statistics shows right that the poverty reduced. And I promised also to explain why the sanctions did not work, or how did they work, and what was going on with the Russian industry. So you know probably that sanctions were designed in a way that certain components of what is produced in Russia will not be supplied anymore. And here is the question: what happened to industrial growth? Surprisingly, the industrial growth was overall positive, right? But that was positive only because of the armament, because of the production of things that are needed for war. And of course, the question that is interesting for those who are interested in labor is that exploitation has increased, right? And there are numerous evidences that people overwork now, meaning that as an employer of some kind of military factory, you now have much less rights than you had the year before. And aside from this, from the military connected factories, there is a huge decline in other civilian sectors. For example, it's rather a banal one. The washing machine, the production of washing machine decreased by several percent. The cars, the production of transport also decreased. So this means that basically the priority is given to other things, and the import in Russia has also become much more problematic due to sanctions. But the last but not least is that the war costs a lot, and the calculation says that if it will go the same way as it did after the mobilization, the half of the budget for healthcare or education will be spent annually for war, which means that probably in several months or maybe in a year we will see that the government will try to squeeze the Jews from the Russian workers, which already happened in some sectors, but not in the others. And why did it happen, right? Maybe Karl Marx can explain us why sanctions didn't work and why. And what can we do to make them work? So some observers say that the sanctions were too small, too gradual, and mistargeted, because they restrict a lot of actions that we, ordinary Russians, can do. For example, transfer money to or from our relatives which live in different countries to buy some things which are connected to international companies, right? And here Marx would say that there is probably a sign of solidarity of capitalist class, right? And they have kind of international solidarity as well, and therefore we are not seeing Russian oligarchs becoming like employers somewhere, right? It's not the story. What we can instead suggest, right, or claim for is that those people who are in control of sanctions, who are in control of rules and laws in Europe, for example, would instead help to migrate. But as far as I know, the humanitarian visa, it is the thing that you can have in Germany, for example, but it takes a lot, and this is a pretty bureaucratized process. Why not having it everywhere? I don't know. Yes, the assistance of opposition might be also working better, but also the take over the money of oligarchs and redistribution this money to Russians or to Ukrainians will be much more helpful, right? Because the oligarchs under Putin were very much allowed to spend their money abroad and to save their money abroad. Of course, there is some seizure of private property, of yachts, or the horse of Ramzan Kadyrov was recently taken away in Czech Republic. But we need to feel that it is enough. No, we feel that this is the thing that should be done and thing that should help Russians, right? And I will end with the question about the strategy of left. So this is a question because there is no coalition so far. This is the thing that we try to work on. So what should we as leftists in Russia or in immigration do? So in terms of democracy and in terms of peace, right? And I know that some things that I say will be controversial, but anyway we will have a discussion, so maybe we can exchange our opinions. So in terms of democracy, there is no doubt that Russian society is depoliticized, right? And we're also sure that this was a conscious strategy, or sometimes it's called like a contract between Russian state and Russian population, that basically you do your own life, you do your work and your family things, and you're not participating in politics. And then people who are politicized, they are mostly preoccupied with this question. So how should we persuade our relatives? How should we persuade our friends that politics matter? But this is not actually the question about persuasion, right? We can create a lot of arguments. We can work on a rational level. But if people in Russia, which is absolutely true for most of them, do not have a positive experience of political participation, the opportunities of political mobilization for Russian opposition will be very limited. And therefore the strategy that leftists elaborate and already put in work is repoliticization. So it might be really on a low level, in municipal level, right? So Russia is still kind of a hybrid regime in a certain sense, which means basically that, of course, it's a dictatorship, it's an autocracy, but still in this autocracy there are some elections, and municipal elections, or elections for the mayor of Moscow, as we discussed a second ago, right? And we must use this opportunity to repoliticize. We have no illusions about the fairness of this election, but still there is an opportunity to talk to people. And this is much better than trying to persuade someone that, I don't know, politics in general matters, because when you have no way to participate, it's probably will be just a speculation. And there is the strategy, or at least something that I hear from being in various left communities, is that, of course, the topic of armament of Ukraine is controversial for Western left, right? And the argument is clear that NATO is evil, that US is a militaristic empire, and that the expansion or the investment in military corporations is not a good thing, right? The response from Russian left is that basically Putin is not less imperialistic. He is not against US colonization, US empire, right? He is not against the empire as a concept. He wants to be an emperor himself, right? And here, for tactical reasons, some of us say that we need to compromise, right? And we must support armament, but still on the long distance we have to think about the reorganization of world order in a way that this conflict will never happen, and neither the, I don't know, bombardment of Belgrade, the thing that Putin likes to mention a lot, that this thing is not supposed to happen. So that's basically it from me. Thank you for your patience. I hope it was not too little and not too much new information, and I will happy to answer to your questions.
Well, it was certainly not too little information. Okay, thank you for a whole lot of information. As I said before, the political discussion I think we really should have at the end when we heard all the presentations, but I could imagine that there are really factual questions about your presentation. And the floor would be open for that. Also Verständnisfragen, Fragen zu dem, was an Fakten jetzt berichtet wurde, könnte man jetzt machen, in welcher Sprache auch immer. Haben wir ein Mikro fürs Publikum? Passt, dann nehmen wir eins von denen. Da war eine, hebst du nochmal die Hand, danke.
Ich hätte auch laut reden. I could have talked more loudly.
Wir nehmen auf.
Ah, okay. For recording then, of course. No, it's fine, it's fine. You presented those numbers on public opinion in the Russian Federation. Where did you get those? Were they published somewhere? If yes, where were they published? Just to get some grasp on how reliable they are.
Yes, there were at least two projects that I know, actually more, but I can recall the names of two. The first one is Levada Center. This is a kind of Soviet, I would say, liberal dissident community of sociologists that was formed in late 80s, and since then they conduct public opinion polls. Of course, they are a little bit, I would say, biased. They have this assumption that Russian population is still suffering from some kind of Stalinism, and therefore their data might be already distorted by these kind of assumptions. And the second, so the first is Levada Center, and the second project is Chroniki, from Chronos, from time, right? This project, I'm not sure if it has such strong assumptions, but also the Russian state, how do we call it, FCIOM, right? The All-Russian Center of the Research on Public Opinions. This one is also conducted the research on what Russians think about the war, which is not called war in this research, but still, yes. So there you can check it.
Da hinten, ja.
Yeah, hi, I'm also Russian, so I'm a bit biased. But I just would like to compliment. I liked a lot that you guys said about a possible other direction of sanctions, that let's welcome Russians to the West. And I think this is a part that's completely missing currently. When you was telling about migrant routes of Russians, it's Kazakhstan, Georgia, Armenia, all these countries are visa-free for Russians. The Russians emigrate there not because they like it or enjoy living in these countries, but because they can come to these countries. Mm-hmm. They cannot come to Austria, they cannot come to Georgia, to Germany, and so on. And from my personal opinion, it would be much more efficient if you would tell all the money, all educated people can come to Europe or United States or Australia, but you cannot come back. And then it would have a much more significant impact on the Russian economy if all these educated people would just transfer their money from Russian economy, take it away from it, and it would be much more efficient than banning all imports, and still you can buy iPod in Russia. It's just now imported via Turkey. And it's called parallel import, or you still can buy whatever you want actually, just the surcharge is just 10%, and that's all.
Yes, absolutely, I agree with you. That's why the picture of Karl Marx was there. There is certainly a kind of solidarity that capitalist class exposes towards each other internationally, yeah.
But if you allow, I would really like to take this question then in the general discussion, because I think it's really that this is a question to discuss also what is happening here about this reluctance to take people, and now focus on questions of understanding, please.
I will ask my question in German because it's so much easier for me.
Yeah, I will translate then.
Wenn ihr nochmal was sagen könntet über die militanten Aktionen gegen die Rekrutierungsbüros. Du hast eine Zahl genannt und auch was zu der Repression gesagt. Vielleicht könntest du es noch kurz ausführen, wie die Kommunikation darüber läuft, wie die Repression droht. Ja, genau. So.
Yes, thank you very much for your question. About the communication, there are still some social networks that people use, which are not as under control as, for example, Telegram or Vkontakte, right? I would not name them anyway. You can find this information. I guess even BBC published something about this. I'm not sure, but this is the thing that is not lacking from that is not suffering from the lack of media coverage. So yeah, I'm not sure if there is a the source of information that unifies every case, but maybe my comrades will talk about it later. Yeah.